morning all, welcome back to ABR Loons, and today we are installing a USB charger into the Tenere 700. And as you can see, I've got my most valuable tool out of the toolbox. My tool pull. So first job, taking off the screen, and we also have a screen protector, a headlamp protector, which we've taken off. Next job, we're removing the side panel, and the idea is to install the USB socket in that part of the headlamp cluster or area, however you want to describe it. So we've used the 10 amp supply for the Garmin GPS that we've got connected up here already. On taking off the side panel, we discovered that, so we've now moved over to the other side, removing off the near side panel. And just to make life a little bit easier here, little trick of the trade that Paul has is just by leaning the bike off camber just against some upright with a piece of timber against the rack there, just makes life a little bit easier for working on. So side panel, you have these little 3 connectors here which go into, as you can see, 1, 2 and the third hole just up there. Only a quarter turn on them. They pop out and then you just pull them out by hand. And you have a couple of the screws that fasten the side panel to the top here and here, and one just there, which come out easy enough. And then you've just got your indicator housing, which is, if you just lift the little catch just there on top, it allows the male part to pop out. Then remove the LED screen display. Okay, so Paul now just has to, having taken those 2 bolts out, just manipulate this up and out. And this is often the part that really confuses people about removing these, is having removed that bolt and that bolt from there and there. If you look closely here, that part and that part sit inside inside these 2 areas here, and they slot down and tighten in, so you just have to literally manipulate the screen upwards and then out. It will come out, but if you've not done it before, you'll be thinking there's another bolt somewhere hidden away that you're not sure about. So in relation to the headlamp cluster, once you remove that one and that one, you're then left with removing the 2 lower ones, which is more entertaining. But a little tip for this is, you can see it down there, once you've got your head loose, just a fraction, you can take your spanner bit, your screwdriver bit, whatever out, and feed your fingers in from underneath where you'll have more room, and it will just unscrew very simply. So don't think you've got to try and keep your ratchet on it permanently to undo it. Just crack it and then get your fingers on it and unscrew it yourself naturally, unless anyone else has got a little device or they can suggest something which would be handy for us going into the future and others behind us. So for this one here, which is very difficult to get to, we found that the best item for that was a simple Allen key. used up less room, and all you literally do is, once you've got it on the head of the bolt, give it about a quarter turn. That loosens it enough for you to be able to get your fingers on it and just turn it. It'll only turn a few times and then it just slides out. Okay, so the next part now is to remove the actual headlamp cluster itself, which is that bolt there, and then the same on the other side. So when removing the bolts from the headlamp cluster, which are these, remember to also remove with them these spacer washers. Don't leave them in or they'll just drop out, you might lose them. And then before removing the headlamp cluster, we need to just undo one side of the bar that holds the sat nav on the top. So now, just before removing the actual headlamp cluster, the next thing is to remove this wiring connector. It's a bit tricky. You have to get a little screwdriver in there, if you can just about see, manipulate the part that holds it in and then pull it out. And the reason why we undid this is you need to then just pull these two uprights that hold the screen on apart slightly. This will allow you then to lift the headlamp cluster out, which we've done, and they're sitting sweetly there. Then your USB charger drops or pushes into the hole, leaving your rubber seal at the top, and this bottom part obviously is taken off prior to sliding it in. Once you've got it in, that's when you apply the outer screw to secure your charger in place. You may find that it's a bit tight on here, so what we advise is, as we found, is push it in so far and then manipulate this onto the screw thread, get it up a bit, and then push the USB charger right down into its position, and then finalise by then finishing off putting the tightener right up to the top. If you push the charger in fully, you may struggle to get the retaining screw on. That's why we advise push it in so far, then get the retaining screw on, screw it up as far as it will go, and then push the USB charger in the whole way, and then tighten up with the retaining screw. So please note that these are polarity sensitive, so once in place, ensure that when you connect your wires up from underneath, you don't just put them on whichever one you can get to first. Red is going to the plus positive, so you need to just check that you're putting it on the right spade connector. So the spade connectors are both in place, and even though they were crimped, there was a little bit of movement on them slightly, but because obviously the Tenere is an adventure bike, and besides just being driven on the road, it's going to be doing a lot of off-road, a lot of banging and smashing around. So as a little bit of extra precaution, we've attached a cable tie around the top of the thread, one going down the middle and a smaller one at the base of the heads of the two female connectors. So that's now holding them good-o in place. They can't rattle or come loose at all. So little tip there, they might be worth doing, because the last thing you want is for one of those to come loose and then you've got to strip everything back again. So the cables now, we've just positioned them here and here with a little bit of gaffer tape, and it's just to ensure that your cables don't move into a position that they could get caught or snagged by the headlamp cluster or the bolts when you're replacing that. So you then need to take off your connector the female from the male. Voila. Then if you look inside here, you'll see that there's 3 cables going in, 2 lives and a neutral. So we advise that you mark up which port the neutral goes into. Then remove the rubber bungs. There'll be 3 in there, and that's what they look like. So as you've got your 2 ports open. Now, the little male spade connectors go in a certain way into the port, and they will clip in. There you go. So just be careful when you're doing that to ensure they're clipped in correctly, and that your neutral lines up with your pre-marked neutral on the wiring. So having put the 2 connectors together, then we placed a little bit of silicone down the wiring, where the wiring went into the connector, just to seal off the end, and then finally used some electrical tape to seal up the cables completely. So there's the wiring in place, and Paul's just going to give you some info now.
As it comes off a 10 amp supply through here, it's into a 3 amp fuse to fuse down for the USB connector. Okay,
and before we put it all together, you need to test it to make sure it works, otherwise you're stripping the bike again. So quick switch, and there we go, it's all lit up, so we have power. And there it is off. So then we put the headlamp cluster back in, just easing the 2 uprights here apart slightly, ensuring when you put it back in that your cables feed into the little lugs that are cut out on the bike. Okay, time lapse, 30 minutes in, and we finally got that bolt and that bolt in. They're really tricky to get in. Best thing to do is get them in by hand. Once they've caught, get them in as far as you possibly can, and then get your little Allen key or what have you on, just to finally nip it up. But it's a difficult process to manipulate the bike and the handlebars to be able to get it in. It really is a 2-man job. Then your 4 side bolts, obviously 2 either side, and a top bar bolt. Then dash in, remember to lift it up and slot it, the 2 retainers into their respective holes, and then tighten it up at the back. And again, just to repeat, this is often the part that catches people out. It certainly did for us the first time we tried it. Having unscrewed the 2 retaining bolts at the back, we just couldn't figure out why the actual screen wouldn't come out. It's because you've got to manipulate it, lift it up slightly, and then it will lift out. So something to note, quite important when you're putting the bike back together. When you're putting these little side panels in, and in our case here we have, I think it's a bronze headlamp cover protector. You can see there's a well nut here. Well, that is actually basically this item here with that screw thread inserted into it. Now, when you put these back in, do not push them in, trying to force it to get a grip. You have to feel for it and let it just take gently and start to bite. If you start to push it, trying to get it to bite and tighten up, what will happen is you'll push that well nut out of the rubber seal, and then that is useless, and you'll have to buy some more. And apparently from Yamaha they're about £10 for how much? For
One.
For one. £10 for one. OEM one. So just be careful when you're doing that. So there you go, the fitting of a USB cable charger to the Tenere 700. Took two of us together with a little bit of videoing, about an hour and a half of taking apart, putting it together and trying to deal with that little difficult part. So an hour and a half of your time, two of you. Or alternatively, of course, you could, if you wished, just do this. A few seconds. Anyway, choice is yours. Bye bye. So there you can see the fitted USB charger with two charging points on it. We've just got one connected up at the moment. It will do a phone. And here is the, on the other side, is the one that plugs into a cigarette lighter, which is a much cheaper, quicker and easier way to do it. However, if you are on rough terrain, banging around, there's a potential chance that this will come loose and what have you, whereas the other one won't. And this is ignition based, so once you switch the ignition off goes the power to the USB chargers.